The nurse agreed to a fake marriage with the Millionaire CEO to pay her brother's surgery. But love wasn't in the contract. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The smell of antiseptic filled the quiet hospital hallway. It was past midnight, and the fluorescent lights buzzed softly over the pale linoleum floor. Nurse Claire Monroe rubbed her tired eyes and adjusted her scrubs. Her 12-hour shift was almost over, but her mind was not on rest. It was on the surgery her little brother needed, one that she could not afford. Through the glass wall, she saw the night skyline of Seattle glimmering like 1,000 cold stars. Somewhere in that city, people were celebrating success, wealth, and comfort. But in this ward, all she could feel was the weight of bills stacked on her kitchen counter and the sound of the hospital's payment reminder echoing in her voicemail. Her brother's surgery cost $75,000. The number haunted her more than any nightmare. When she heard the elevator doors open, she looked up. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped out, tall, perfectly composed, with the kind of quiet power that turned heads. His shoes clicked sharply against the floor as he walked toward the private room at the end of the hall. Everyone knew who he was. Ethan Reed, 34 years old, CEO of Reed Medical Group. The man who owned half the hospital she worked in. Claire quickly lowered her gaze, pretending to check a chart. But as he passed, he paused. "Miss Monroe," his voice was smooth, deep, and controlled. "You are the night nurse for this floor, correct?" "Yes, sir," she answered softly. "My father's condition has worsened." His jaw tightened. "He has requested to see a nurse he trusts." Inside the room, the air was heavy with the rhythmic beeping of machines. Mr. Reed Sr. lay pale and frail, oxygen tubes running beneath his nose. His hand trembled as he reached for his son. "Ethan," the old man whispered, "you have built empires, but you have no family. Promise me you will marry before I go. It is in the will." Ethan froze. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. Behind him, Claire adjusted the IV drip, pretending not to hear, though the tension in the room pressed on her chest. Minutes later, the monitors steadied, and the old man drifted into sleep. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. Claire started to leave, but his voice stopped her. "You said earlier your brother's surgery was postponed because of costs?" Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "I read your request in the staff file," he said quietly. "How much is it?" "$75,000, she murmured. "But that is not your problem, Mr. Reed." He turned to face her. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. "It could be solved with one signature." Hessen playing. "I do not understand," she said, frowning. He took a breath. "Marry me. 1 year. On paper only. You will get the full amount for your brother's surgery tomorrow." For a moment, all she could hear was the monitor beeping in the next room. Claire blinked, certain she had misheard. "You cannot be serious." "I am," Ethan replied calmly. "My father's will requires that I be married before his death, or I lose control of the company. You need money. I need a wife. It is a transaction, nothing more." Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She looked at him, a man who could buy anything, even a person's dignity, and felt both anger and despair rise inside her. "So you are asking me to be your wife? For money?" "I am offering you a solution," he said. "There will be a contract, no intimacy, no expectations, no emotions, just a legal arrangement." The room fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled softly through the night sky. Claire stared at the floor, her throat tight. Every part of her wanted to say no. But then she thought of Ben, her little brother, lying weak in another wing of the same hospital. She thought of his smile fading a little more each day. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "If I say yes, you will really pay for his surgery?" Ethan nodded once. "Tomorrow morning. Every cent." Claire's breath caught. She looked down at her trembling hands. "Then where do I sign?" The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the window like a warning she could not hear. And as Ethan handed her the contract, both of them knew. This deal was about to cost more than either imagined. The next morning, the sky over Seattle was pale gray, streaked with the thin mist of early rain. Nurse Claire Monroe sat in the cafeteria, her untouched cup of coffee growing cold between her hands. The events from the night before replayed in her mind on an endless loop. She still could not believe what Ethan Reed had said. "Marry me. 1 year. I will pay for your brother's surgery." The words had sounded unreal, like something from a late-night soap opera. Yet when she had returned home, a black car had already been waiting outside her small apartment. Inside the envelope on her doorstep, there had been proof, a payment confirmation for her brother's full medical cost. Claire's heart had pounded as she stared at the hospital seal on the document. The surgery was now fully covered. The relief that should have come with that realization never did. Instead, she felt an ache, a quiet panic that she had just traded something she could never get back. The cafeteria TV murmured news about Reed Medical Group and their upcoming leadership transition. Words like inheritance and board control flashed across the screen. She now understood what Ethan had meant about his father's will. He was not just a man in crisis. He was a man with the weight of an empire on his shoulders. Before she could think further, her phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unknown number. "Meet me at Reed Tower, 10 a.m. Do not be late. ER." Claire looked up at the clock. It was 9:05. Her pulse spiked. She grabbed her bag, threw away the cold coffee, and ran out into the drizzle. Reed Tower loomed over downtown like a monument of glass and power. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, gold accents, and silent elevators. The receptionist already seemed to know her name. "Mr. Reed is expecting you, Miss Monroe. Top floor." When the elevator doors opened, Ethan was waiting, his expression unreadable. He gestured toward a large conference table where a stack of documents lay neatly beside a pen. "This," he said, "is our contract." Claire hesitated before sitting down. The room felt sterile, as if every inch of warmth had been stripped away. She glanced at the papers and saw legal phrases blur together. Duration 12 months. Confidentiality clause. No romantic or physical expectations. Financial transfer confirmed. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You really meant it." Ethan's gaze did not soften. "I do not make offers I cannot fulfill." He walked toward the window, hands in his pockets. "You will move into my residence immediately after the ceremony. It will be small, private, handled by my attorney. In public, you will act as my wife. You will attend 5 events with me during the year. Beyond that, you are free to live your life as you wish." Claire tried to process his tone, controlled, calculated, like he was discussing a business merger. "And after 1 year? The marriage will be dissolved. You will receive a separate compensation and complete financial freedom. That is all." Her fingers tightened on the pen. "And love?" she asked quietly. Ethan turned back to her, his face unreadable. "Love is not part of this contract, Miss Monroe. It complicates things." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the city far below. Claire looked at the pen again. Signing meant saving her brother's life. Nothing else mattered. She took a slow breath and signed her name. When she placed the pen down, Ethan slid a simple silver ring across the table. It was not romantic. It was symbolic, a placeholder, a prop. She slipped it onto her finger anyway, her pulse trembling in her wrist. "Welcome to the arrangement," Ethan said softly. Later that day, she walked out of the building into the crisp afternoon air. The world looked the same. Traffic lights, city noise, strangers rushing past. But everything inside her had shifted. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from the hospital. "Ben's surgery scheduled for Friday. Funds verified. Thank you for your payment, Mrs. Reed." The name made her flinch. Mrs. Reed. She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. That night, Claire stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at the ring glinting under the light. Her reflection looked both familiar and foreign. The same face, but a different woman. One who had just sold her name, maybe her heart, for the sake of someone she loved. She whispered to her reflection, "This is just a contract, nothing more." But deep down, she knew that nothing about this would ever stay simple. 3 days later, the courthouse in downtown Seattle stood quiet under a pale morning. Sunday inside, the small ceremony took less than 15 minutes. There were no flowers, no music, and no guests except Ethan's lawyer and a notary who barely looked up as they signed the papers. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Claire Monroe felt nothing but the strange weight of the ring on her finger. Ethan Reed turned to her with a polite nod, his expression neutral. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Reed," he said formally, as if they had just completed a business transaction. Outside, the wind carried the chill of early spring. Claire pulled her coat tighter while Ethan's driver opened the door of a black car. The ride to his estate passed in silence. Skyscrapers gave way to tree-lined roads until the car stopped before a steel gate that opened automatically. Beyond it stretched a long driveway and a mansion that looked like it had been carved out of ambition itself. As she stepped out, she caught her reflection in the glass Philatelner's shoes, a borrowed coat, and a gold ring that did not belong to her world. A housekeeper greeted them and led her inside. Every surface gleamed. Every corner smelled faintly of cedar and money. She followed the sound of Ethan's voice into the main hall. "This is where you will stay," he said, gesturing to a staircase that curved upward. "You will have your own room and complete privacy. Dinner is served at 7, but you are free to eat in your quarters if you prefer." She nodded, her hands clasped tightly. "I will not be any trouble." "I did not assume you would be," he replied quietly. Her room was on the second floor, spacious and sterile like a hotel suite. Large windows overlooked the lake below, where rain rippled across the gray surface. She placed her bag on the dresser and stood in the stillness, feeling both safe and suffocated at the same time. When the clock struck 7, she forced herself downstairs. The dining room was long and elegant, the kind of place where every sound echoed. Ethan was already seated at the far end, scrolling through emails on a tablet. He looked up only when she took the chair opposite him. "I hope you find everything satisfactory," he said. "The house is beautiful," she answered, unsure if she should thank him or apologize for being there. "It serves its purpose," he said simply. Dinner was quiet except for the clinking of silverware and the occasional sound of rain on the windows. The food was perfect, prepared by someone she had not even seen. Yet the silence felt heavier than any noise. Claire finally gathered her courage. "You do not have to keep pretending when it is just us," she said softly. Ethan's fork paused midair. "Pretending? That this is normal? That we are husband and wife?" He leaned back, studying her. "It is not about pretending. It is about discipline. The more consistent we are, the fewer mistakes we make when people are watching. So it is a rehearsal," she said, "if you wish to call it that." A small spark of defiance rose in her chest. "Then I hope I can play my part well enough for you, Mr. Reed." His eyes lifted to hers, steady, unreadable. "I never doubted that you could, Mrs. Reed." The way he said her name, cold yet deliberate, sent a shiver through her. That night, she walked along the hallway, passing framed photographs of Ethan with world leaders, scientists, and doctors. In none of them did he smile. She stopped at one picture showing a younger Ethan with his father in front of a new hospital wing. His father's hand rested proudly on his shoulder, while Ethan's expression was already serious, guarded. Back in her room, she found a folder placed neatly on the bedside table. Inside was her new identification, health insurance, and a bank statement confirming that her brother's surgery had been paid in full. Beneath it lay a handwritten note in Ethan's precise handwriting. "Your brother's operation is scheduled for Friday. I trust this will bring you peace of mind. ERN. Tenties Recom." Claire sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in her hand. It should have brought her comfort, but instead, it made her heart ache. The transaction was complete, yet it felt like she had entered a contract that would cost her far more than money. The next morning, she prepared breakfast for herself in the guest kitchen, surprised when Ethan entered wearing a dark overcoat. Already on a phone call. His tone was clipped, efficient, commanding. When he noticed her, he ended the call and said, "I will be away for the day. There is a charity event next week. You will attend as my wife." She almost choked on her coffee. "A charity event?" "Yes, formal dress. My assistant will deliver the details. And what exactly am I supposed to do there?" "Stand beside me. Smile when appropriate. Speak only when spoken to. That is all." Her brows furrowed. "You make it sound like an audition." "It is not," he said. "It is business." "Ah." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You did well yesterday," he added after a moment. "You did not run." Claire blinked, unsure whether it was a compliment or a warning. "I guess it is too late for that now," she said quietly. Ethan's lips curved, just slightly. Indeed. As the door closed behind him, Claire exhaled slowly, staring at the empty hallway. Somewhere in another wing of the hospital, her brother was being prepped for surgery, and she told herself again that this was all for him. Yet a quiet unease crept into her chest, a sense that she had stepped into a world where the rules of love, honesty, and freedom no longer applied. Outside, the rain returned, steady and cold, whispering against the mansion's windows like a promise she could not yet understand. A week later, Claire Monroe stood in front of a full-length mirror, trying not to panic. The reflection staring back at her did not look like a nurse who worked double shifts to survive. The woman in the mirror wore a navy blue evening gown, subtle but elegant. Her hair swept into a soft updo. Her trembling hands adjusted the thin bracelet that Ethan's assistant had left on the dresser with a note that simply said, "Required for tonight." The door opened behind her. Ethan Reed stepped in, dressed in a classic black tuxedo, the kind that looked effortless on him. His eyes flicked over her once, quick and assessing, like he was confirming that she fit the image. "You look appropriate," he said. "Thank you," she replied, unsure if that was a compliment. "This event is important," he continued. "It is the annual Reed Medical Charity Gala. Every investor, every board member will be there. They expect a wife who understands decorum." Claire nodded slowly. "So you mean they expect someone who will not embarrass you?" Ethan's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. "I mean they expect someone who belongs." The ride to the hotel was quiet, except for the rain tapping against the tinted windows. As the limousine pulled up to the grand entrance, bright lights and cameras flashed. Reporters shouted Ethan's name, their voices blending with the soft notes of the orchestra inside. Claire felt her pulse quicken. When Ethan stepped out, he extended his hand toward her. The gesture was deliberate, rehearsed. She placed her hand in his, and the warmth of his palm startled her. The photographer's flashes exploded around them. "Smile," Ethan murmured under his breath, his lips barely moving. She did, though her heart raced. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glimmered like constellations, and the air smelled faintly of champagne and money. Claire tried to remember every rule Ethan's assistant had given her. Walk slowly, stay to his left, never interrupt a conversation. He introduced her to a circle of elegantly dressed guests, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "Gentlemen, this is my wife, Claire," he said evenly. Her pulse skipped at the word wife. She nodded politely, forcing a calm smile as men in tailored suits and women in diamond necklaces studied her with practiced curiosity. As the evening went on, she began to relax, almost forgetting the lines between truth and performance. Then, as a waiter passed by, a glass of red wine tipped from his tray. The liquid splashed across Ethan's crisp white shirt and down his sleeve. The crowd gasped softly. Claire reacted before anyone else. "I am so sorry," she exclaimed, grabbing a napkin and stepping forward. "Let me help you." Her hands shook as she dabbed at the stain, and for a second she realized how close she was standing to him, close enough to feel his breath. Ethan looked down, then said quietly, "It is all right, Claire." When she looked up, she saw something new in his eyes. Not irritation, not coldness, something gentler, like he was seeing her for the first time. The moment passed quickly as staff rushed to assist. But the room felt different now, the tension lighter, the whispers softer. Later, as the gala continued, the host called Ethan to the stage. He spoke with his usual precision about the company's medical initiatives and the importance of healthcare equality. Then, unexpectedly, he paused. "My wife reminds me daily," he said, glancing toward her, "that compassion is as valuable as innovation." The crowd turned to look at her, applauding warmly. Claire's cheeks burned. She forced a smile, but inside, something stirred that she could not explain. After the event ended, they rode home in silence. The city lights flickered past the car windows, and Claire finally spoke. "You did not have to say that about me." Ethan looked out the window. It was the truth. "Still," she said softly, "I know what this is. You do not need to pretend for me." He turned his gaze to her then, his tone calm but firm. "You think I was pretending?" "Everything we do is pretending," she said. "That is what the contract says." "Well, the contract defines the boundaries," he replied, "but it does not define how I see you." The words left her breathless for a moment. She looked away quickly, watching the rain slide down the glass. When they arrived at the mansion, Claire hurried upstairs, still shaken. In her room, she unpinned her hair and placed the bracelet on the vanity. Her reflection looked different again, still beautiful, but troubled. Downstairs, Ethan poured himself a glass of water, staring at the small red stain still clinging faintly to his cuff. He remembered her voice, her trembling hands, the way she looked up at him. For the first time in years, something unfamiliar flickered in his chest, a feeling that was not control, not calculation, but something dangerously close to warmth. Upstairs, Claire leaned against the door and whispered to herself, "You are not supposed to fall for him. This is not real. Tend." But her heart, still pounding from the sound of applause and his quiet words, refused to listen. Outside, the last drops of rain slid down the mansion windows, catching the glow of city lights like the faint shimmer of something just beginning to break through the surface. 3 days after the gala, the mansion felt unusually quiet. Claire Monroe arranged fresh lilies in the hallway, but her mind kept circling back to Ethan Reed's words. "The contract defines the boundaries, but it does not define how I see you." She told herself to forget it, yet the memory clung to her like perfume on skin. That afternoon, Ethan's assistant delivered a folder to her room. Inside was an invitation to the upcoming Health for Hope press conference, and a short note in Ethan's handwriting. "Join me on stage. Speak about patient care." Then, Claire's stomach tightened. She found Ethan in his study, his focus buried in his laptop. "You want me to speak in public?" she asked. "That was never part of our deal." He looked up calmly. "You are my wife. People expect to hear from you." "I am not trained for that," she said. "You are a nurse who has seen real people suffer," he replied. "You do not need training for truth." The words caught her off guard. After a long pause, she nodded. "All right, I will do it." Hubbard. The next day, the ballroom was filled with journalists and cameras. Ethan spoke first, announcing the company's new charity for children in need of heart surgery. Then he called Claire forward. The lights blinded her, but she forced herself to step onto the stage. "I am not a public speaker," she began softly, "but I am a nurse. I have seen families sell everything for a chance to save someone they love. Compassion should not depend on income. It should be a shared duty." The room went still. Then applause broke out, louder than she expected. When she glanced sideways, Ethan was watching her with an expression she could not read, something halfway between pride and awe. Afterward, reporters asked about their marriage. Ethan answered smoothly, "Sometimes life brings the right person at the wrong time. We were just smart enough to say yes." His words drew polite laughter, but Claire's heart twisted. Was that how he really saw her, a convenient yes in a wrong moment? That night, back at the mansion, he handed her a glass of water. "You were remarkable," he said simply. "I only spoke the truth," she replied. "Exactly," he said. "That is what people remember." She smiled faintly but turned away, afraid of what her heart was beginning to remember too. When she checked her phone before bed, a message from the hospital appeared. "Ben's surgery successful. Stable condition." Tears blurred her vision. The contract had saved her brother's life. Yet somehow, it had also tied hers to a man she was no longer sure how to see. Downstairs, Ethan stared out at the dark lake. For the first time, he wondered if this marriage of convenience had already crossed into something dangerously real. The next evening, rain swept across the lake behind the mansion, turning the windows into blurred mirrors of light. Claire Monroe sat in the living room, reading updates about her brother's recovery. The message from the doctor was clear. Ben is strong, stable, and healing well. Relief washed over her again, soft and quiet this time. She looked up when she heard footsteps. Ethan Reed appeared at the doorway, one hand pressed against his chest. His face looked pale. "Are you all right?" she asked, standing quickly. "I am fine," he said, though his voice faltered. "It is just a small pain. It happens sometimes." Before he could take another step, he staggered. Claire rushed forward, catching his arm before he fell. "Ethan, you need to sit down," she said firmly, guiding him to the couch. His breathing came short and uneven. She grabbed the medical kit from the shelf, her instincts taking over. "Focus on your breathing," she said. "In through your nose, out through your mouth." He tried to joke, even through the pain. "You sound like every nurse I have ever ignored." "Drain? Then stop ignoring me," she replied, checking his pulse. "It is too fast. You need to rest." The moment stretched in silence. His heartbeat slowed under her fingertips, steady again. When he finally looked at her, the distance that had always existed between them felt thinner than ever. "You did not call for help," he said softly. You just acted. You are my patient right now, she answered. That is what I do. But her voice trembled as she added, You scared me. How day? Ethan's gaze softened. I did not mean to. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. You are the first person who ever looks at me like I am human, not a headline. Her heart raced. She wanted to pull her hand away, but she did not. The warmth between their palms felt real, unplanned, and dangerously fragile. When the rain eased, she stood, trying to steady her breathing. You need to rest, she said again, her voice quieter. Ethan leaned back against the couch. Stay a moment, please. Tooth thou. She hesitated, then sat beside him. The storm outside faded into silence. They said nothing, but the space between them no longer felt like part of a contract. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had agreed to and neither could stop. The next morning, the mansion felt unusually quiet. Claire Monroe woke early, still thinking about the moment on the couch when Ethan Reed had held her hand. She tried to dismiss it as gratitude, nothing more. But when she looked at the faint imprint of his touch, her heart betrayed her. She headed downstairs for breakfast, but Ethan was already gone. The housekeeper mentioned he had left for a board meeting. Claire nodded, though she felt a strange unease she could not explain. By noon, she understood why. Her phone buzzed with an alert. A headline filled the screen. Reed Medical CEO's marriage exposed as contract deal. Sources claim wife paid to act as spouse. Her breath caught. The article included photos from the gala and quotes from an unnamed insider. Every word painted her as a liar, a woman who had sold herself for money. Her hands trembled as she dialed Ethan's number. It went to voicemail. She tried again, still nothing. Then a message arrived from his assistant. Mr. Reed requests that you remain at home. He will handle the situation. But the situation was already out of control. Reporters were gathering outside the gate. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages from hospital colleagues. Some defended her, others questioned everything. By the time Ethan returned that night, cameras were flashing through the rain. He walked in, expression hard. I told you not to go outside, he said sharply. I have not, she replied, holding up her phone. But the world already has. He exhaled, pacing the room. This came from inside the company. Someone leaked the contract draft. Claire's eyes widened. Draft? The one we both signed? No, he said, jaw tightening. The early version, the one with payment details. Someone wanted to humiliate you and discredit me. She stared at him, voice cracking. Do you know what they are saying about me? That I am a fraud, a gold digger, a fake wife. I will fix it, Ethan said quickly. I will hold a press conference tomorrow. And say what? She asked bitterly. That you paid me but you also respect me? The silence between them was sharp as glass. She took a step back. You cannot fix this, Ethan. You built this wall between us from the beginning. You made me a transaction. That is not what I meant to do. Maybe not, she said, tears rising. But that is what it became. She pulled the ring from her finger and set it on the table. You can tell your board whatever you want. I am done pretending. Tie me? Claire, wait, he said, his voice breaking for the first time. But she was already walking away, her suitcase half packed upstairs. An hour later, as she stood by the doorway, she glanced back one last time. Ethan stood motionless at the foot of the stairs, rain dripping from his coat, eyes hollow. Goodbye, Mr. Reed, she said softly. Thank you for saving my brother. Then she stepped out into the storm, the gate closing behind her like a final line in a story that had started with a contract but was ending with something heartbreakingly human. Inside, Ethan sank into the chair, staring at the ring glinting under the chandelier. For the first time in years, the man who always had control finally realized what it meant to lose something money could never buy. 3 months passed. The headlines that had once burned across every news site had faded, replaced by newer scandals. But for Ethan Reed, the silence that followed was worse than the noise. The mansion felt empty, stripped of warmth. Every room still carried traces of her laughter in the kitchen, her voice echoing softly down the hall. The scent of jasmine that lingered in the guest room, she once called hers. He buried himself in work, attending board meetings, expanding the foundation, but nothing filled the space she had left behind. Each night, he found himself standing by the window, staring at the lake where the rain had first softened between them. He had built an empire to prove he needed no one, and now that empire felt like a cage. When his assistant entered one morning with a file, he barely looked up. "The Hearts for All conference is confirmed, sir," she said. "It will be televised nationally. The board expects you to deliver a speech about compassion and integrity." Ethan gave a short nod. "Schedule it." The day of the conference arrived. The hotel ballroom was filled with doctors, donors, and reporters. Cameras lined the walls. Ethan stepped up to the podium, the lights bright against his face. For a moment, the words he had rehearsed vanished. He looked at the rows of faces waiting for him to perform, and something inside him broke. He took a deep breath. "A few months ago," he began slowly, "I stood on a stage like this and spoke about compassion. But at the time, I did not understand what it truly meant." The audience shifted, sensing the honesty in his voice. "I made mistakes. I treated people like business deals, even the one person who showed me what kindness really is." His gaze drifted toward the back of the room, almost as if searching for her. "I built this foundation because of her," he continued. "Her name is Claire Monroe. She was my wife by contract, but she became my teacher by grace. She reminded me that love and compassion are not obligations. They are choices. Choices that define who we really are." The ballroom went silent. Then, from the far end of the room, a soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone had stepped through the doorway. Claire stood there, wearing a simple cream dress, her eyes steady but shining. She looked healthy, stronger, and calmer than the last time he had seen her. For a moment, the world around them blurred. Ethan's voice faltered. "Because love was not in our contract," he said, "but it found its way anyway." Applause erupted, but he barely heard it. Claire walked toward the stage, each step measured, deliberate. When she reached him, he set the microphone down. "You should not have said my name," she whispered. "I had to," he said quietly. "The truth deserved to be heard." "Oh." She looked up at him, searching his face. "And what now, Ethan?" He hesitated, his voice almost trembling. "Now, I ask for nothing. Only forgiveness." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then slowly, Claire nodded. "Forgiveness does not erase the past, but maybe it can help build something honest." The audience watched in silence as he reached out his hand. She took it not as part of a performance this time, but as two people finally choosing to begin again. No contracts, no conditions. And when they stood there beneath the soft glow of the lights, it was clear to everyone in that room that this was not the end of a story. It was the start of something real. 1 year later, the city skyline glowed under the soft light of spring. The crowd outside the new Ben's Heart Foundation Center gathered in quiet anticipation. A long white ribbon stretched across the entrance, fluttering in the morning breeze. On the stage stood Ethan Reed and Claire Monroe, no longer pretending, no longer bound by paper, but by something far stronger. Ethan adjusted the microphone. His voice carried the warmth of a man who had learned how to speak from the heart, not from a contract. "A year ago," he said, "this foundation began with a mistake, a promise, and a woman who taught me what real purpose means. Today, we open these doors for every child who deserves a chance to live because love and compassion are not luxury, they are responsibility." The audience applauded. Cameras flashed, but Ethan's attention was on the woman beside him. Claire smiled gently as she stepped forward to cut the ribbon. Her hands were steady this time, confident. She turned to him and whispered. "Ben's inside, helping set up the children's art room. He insisted on hanging his drawing by the entrance." Ethan smiled. "He gets that determination from you." "Maybe," she said softly, "but he also learned that people can change." After the ceremony, they walked through the new lobby together. The walls were lined with children's paintings, bright colors, smiling hearts, words like hope and home. At the center hung a glass case containing a single silver wedding ring and a folded page from their old contract. The words, "love, not applicable," had been crossed out and replaced, in careful handwriting, with "love, real." Claire stopped, staring at it, her eyes glistening. "You kept this?" Ethan nodded. "It reminded me where we started, and how far we came." Outside, laughter filled the courtyard as families gathered for the celebration. Claire turned toward Ethan, sunlight touching her hair like gold. "I still do not understand how we ended up here," she said. He smiled. "Neither do I. Maybe because we stopped running from what was real." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring, not the cold, practical one from before, but one carved with simple words inside. No contracts, just vows. "Claire," he said quietly, "you once signed your name to save a life. Will you sign it again to share one with me?" Tears filled her eyes. She took the ring and whispered, "Yes. But this time, not for obligation. For love." By one, the crowd around them erupted in applause as he slipped the ring onto her finger. She laughed through tears, leaning into him as the sound of clapping blended with children's laughter and the music from the nearby fountain. Ethan kissed her forehead and whispered, "We started with a lie, but ended with a truth." Claire smiled, her voice trembling with joy. The best kind of truth. Number. As the camera lights dimmed and the sun rose higher, the scene lingered on the foundation's glass doors, reflecting two people who had finally learned that love, when real, does not need to be written in a contract to last forever.